Okay. So, yeah, really, really warm welcome to Sangha Night this evening. Really lovely to see all of you. This evening we're going to hear from 3 Sangha members giving short talks. But before I introduce them, can you hear me out of the amplifier? Is it coming out of the amplifier? It is turned on. I wonder if the cable might be faulty. But this is number 1. Oh. Well, can you hear me anyway? Good. That's good. What was I talking about? Sangha Night. Yes. Welcome to Sangha Night. So I wanted to let you know about two very special events coming up. So the first is coming up this Sunday, and it's a Sangha Day festival. So we have 5 major festivals throughout our calendar. And this coming Sunday, we're going to celebrate the Sangha Jewel. So when we salute the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, when we salute the 3 jewels before we meditate later on, the Sangha Jewel that we're saluting, it's not just our community here, which is very, very special. To become a jewel, to become a true refuge, it's the disciples of the Buddha who are decisively established in the Dharma. They have insight into the nature of things. And it's our aspiration to become part of that Sangha. We're striving to become part of that Sangha, of the Buddha's disciples, who've kept the Dharma alive and passed it from generation to generation. And on Sunday, we're going to be revering, celebrating that's happened, that people have become established in the Dharma and passed it down from person to person since the time. So we're celebrating that on Sunday. And also what we'll be celebrating is our local Sangha, the Sheffield Sangha, and just how wonderful it is to have such an amazing spiritual community to be part of. Just there's so much strife in the world, so much difficulty in the world. And we're so fortunate to have each other, to have this great community to come to and to be part of. And we're going to be celebrating that on Sunday as well. There's going to be stuff happening all day. So in the morning, there'll be stuff for families to come and join in with. Crafting, and then there'll be a shared meal at 1:00. So bring food for that, a feast, a Sangha Day feast. And then from 2:00, there'll be a choice of either singing, joining the choir and Sangha Gita to do singing as a community, or doing some Metta Bhavana meditation. You can have a choice of activities. And then at 3:30, very excitingly, we're going to vote to give away all the money we've fundraised this past year. So we put a lot of energy into raising money at the garden party, at other events. And then on Sangha Day, we give it all away. We give it away to, we've got 5 different charities to choose from. So at 3:30, you can take part in that. And then the main culmination of the festival is a ritual, a puja at 4:00. And as part of that puja, two important things. One is, if you've made a commitment to the Buddhist path, if that's you've become a mitra, you're training for ordination, you're an order member, we come together as a community and reaffirm those commitments. That's very moving to see people doing that as part of Sangha Day. The other thing that's important is we're going to make food offerings to the shrine and give them away to a local food bank. So bring with you kind of packaged tinned food. We'll put it on the shrine, and afterwards you'll take it to the local food bank. So a couple of things to remember. If you can look at, it's a poster in the tea room, if you can't remember all of that. The main thing is a puja at 4:00, and bring food for that to give to the food bank. Okay. And then the second thing to let you know about is, the next few weeks are going to be really exciting at Sangha Night. On the 22nd, which I think is 2 weeks' time, Padma Vajra will be visiting Sheffield and will be our guest speaker. And he's one of the best Dharma teachers I know, and he's going to be, we'll be really fortunate he's going to come and talk to us about a shocking Buddhist idea, radical idea. Then the week after that is a very special evening. I talked earlier about people making a commitment on the Buddhist path. And the first stage of making a commitment on the Buddhist path is to become a mitra within our community. That's how we mark that within our community. And So far, I think 16 people are going to become mitras on 16 on Tuesday the 29th, which I think is equals a record for Sheffield Buddhist Centre. When I became a mitra in 2006, there were 16 of us, and then since then there hasn't been that many. So it's still not too late if you would like to make a commitment to the Buddhist path and want to just tip us over that 16 mark. It's already 17. We've smashed it. Okay. Well, you might, if you want to make that step and be part of history in the Sheffield Sangha, speak to Sangha Gita or myself, and we can talk to you about what that step involves. Okay. So this evening is very exciting as well. This evening, as I said, we're going to hear from 3 Sangha members about radical reality, about radical Dharma, shocking Buddhist ideas. So this has been our series, a really enjoyable series for the last few weeks. We've been hearing about how the Dharma challenges us, even shocks us. And that's good, it's supposed to. We're not, the reality, the Dharma, you could say the Buddha doesn't want us to stay as we are now in a kind of our cozy, comfortable life that we've got. We need to break out. The Dharma needs us to break out of that and to become, to fulfill our potential. And some of the ideas that Buddhism will present to us seem so different to how we see the world now. They can seem shocking. They can seem very radical. Yeah, maybe even shocking, a little bit challenging. So we've been exploring that over the past few weeks. Yeah. And this evening, we're going to hear, as I said, from 3 Sangha members. We're going to hear from Dennis, from Izzy, and from Dyasinga. And during each series, we try and hear from individuals in the Sangha about their own practice of the Dharma. So it's less theoretical, it's not so abstract, it's not just about ideas, it's about, we're going to be hearing, is there an idea? What is the idea from Buddhism that's been they found really radical? And how has it impacted their life? What is the idea? How did they find it radical? How does it impact their life? How do they put that into practice? How has it changed how they live, perhaps? How they see things? So I'll let them introduce what their ideas will be. First, we're going to hear from Dennis, then we're going to hear from Izzy, and then from Dyasinga. And I won't kind of stand up in between to introduce them, so I'll just allow you guys to come up when it's your turn, and I'll come and say thank you at the end. And Sangha Gita is sitting with a flower, a beautiful yellow dahlia flower. So when she'll wave that after 8 minutes, or rotate it or wave it, and just let her know that after 8 minutes, you make sure you've made eye contact, and then she'll wave again at 10 minutes, and then you definitely do need to stop then after 10 minutes. Okay, so Dennis.
Thank you, everyone. Just checking that the mic works, because it's a slightly odd angle on my jumper. So tonight I'm going to talk about suffering is not so bad. How can that be? How can that be? We don't want to suffer, do we? But Satyajoti talked a few weeks ago on this topic. And the reason suffering is not so bad is that it can give us an impetus to practice. It can be the spark that sets us going. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my own suffering and how that led me to practice and continues to lead me to practice. I'm going to go back to a few weeks and months ago. We were looking at the Wheel of Life. Hopefully you can all remember the Wheel of Life, and but in particular some of the inner realms. And I want to focus on one of them called the God realm. In the God realm, beings live a kind of life of ease and luxury, and everything just falls into place very easily and nicely. And one doesn't have to work very hard at anything. When I was about 16 years old, I think I had a good spell in the God realm. I just left school, went to work. My mother helped me get a job in a local factory, and I've got quite a good list of sort of positive things that were going on for me. So I had money, I had friends, I had leisure, I had holidays, I had parties, and although I didn't realize it at the time, I had something that I look back on and think, yeah, I was only 16, I had youth. Naught cared this body for wind and weather, when youth and I had lived in it together. So says Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And well, that was me. I was invincible. I was unstoppable. I was a 16-year-old with the kind of energy of 10 people, let alone one. It felt like I could do anything, go anywhere, be anybody. However, after about a year of this kind of life of leisure and ease and no responsibilities to anybody but my own pleasure, I came home one day to be told by my parents they were about to separate. And it was kind of no debate, no discussion. It's happening right now. Get used to it. So this felt like one of the pillars of the structure of my life was just being ripped apart. Everything I'd known up until that point was as a family of 4 people. Suddenly, that was all going to change. And to compound this, within 2 years, I went into work to be told I was, along with over 300 other people, 90 days notice, everybody is going to be made redundant. So suddenly my work was going to be over as well. Another pillar of the structure of my life that we kind of rely on and think is so solid was just going to be taken away from me. So, shocking Buddhist idea number 1, the God realm doesn't last. And it doesn't conduce to making you practice or helping you practice. Shocking Buddhist idea number 2, work, career, family are not necessarily safe refuges. So at that time, I didn't particularly have the tools to deal with the pains that those 2 sort of big life events had sort of presented to me. And a lot of the time I kind of withdrew and became a bit reclusive. Over the course of time, those deep, sharp pains became more of a dull, aching kind of sensation, and became part of my conditioning and of the type of person I was, part of my everyday existence. So it led to a general dissatisfaction with life, and a lot of lack of focus, lack of meaning, lack of energy, lack of connection, and lack of community. So it's that feeling of pain that sort of drives us to get going. You need to feel that in the body to actually make a start with things. And that was the feeling that sort of drew me to come here in the first place, this sort of dissatisfaction with the life that I was leading, and all these things that were lacking, and that over time that I've actually found and have become really useful to me. So moving on then and looking at specific practices that help me deal with the suffering that I still encounter. One of the main practices really is to be able to share that suffering with others. Because you see, I've got a sort of a false pride about myself that I can cope and deal with everything that life throws at me. That 16-year-old invincible kid is still there, kind of saying, you can do anything, you don't need anybody. You can deal with anything that life throws at me. So sharing with others when there's an appropriate moment to do so can make myself vulnerable. It can open myself up, and it sort of shatters this myth I have that I can cope with everything, and chips away at that ego that sort of is driving me and saying I can cope. So shocking Buddhist idea number 3, I am not in total control of my life. Another practice that really helps with dealing with suffering is perhaps the cornerstone of my practice now, and that is gratitude. And this is a practice of acknowledging and rejoicing in that which has been of benefit to you, or is of benefit to you, and of course to others. So I do find this a real antidote to the 8 worldly winds, the worldly conditions that the Buddha talked about that we're kind of blown around by at all times. Those being gain and loss. We want to gain things, we want to keep hold of the things we want, we don't want to lose. the things that we are really keen on. The otherworldly winds of approval or disapproval. We want pleasure in life, we don't want pain, and we want to be praised and not blamed. So it's all about seeing that life is actually a flow or a kind of a dance of these conditions. You know, we can never fully eradicate the ones we don't want and just hold on to the ones that we do. And gratitude really comes in for me, because I always find that there's always something to be grateful for. There's never a moment in life in which you cannot think about something or somebody that is actually benefiting you. And this really sort of helps dilute or even eradicate altogether some of the suffering at any given moment. I mean, we can even just be grateful for being alive and all the fantastic conditions that go into place to keep us alive. And I do want to stress, we don't have to wait for suffering to do this practice. You know, we can do it at any given time. It's a wonderful practice. So I'm going to conclude by saying shocking Buddhist idea number 4 is suffering is not so bad, because it can help you to practice. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I've picked a quote from Sangha book Wisdom Beyond Words, and it was actually the first ever quote I ever heard on my first ever retreat with the London Buddhist Centre in 2015. And it goes, "You don't have to justify your existence by being useful. You yourself are the justification for your existence. It's a virtue to be ornamental as well as useful." So this was definitely shocking and radical for me to hear that, working in full-time in London. And I kind of looked around the room when I was reading that, because I really felt like somebody had seen me and just like put that quote in front of me, because they knew what I needed to hear. And it was definitely a point in my life where, and I guess probably throughout my life, acting in pursuit of, like what Dennis was saying, the worldly winds, like praise and also acceptance. At that point, I was working time in London, finishing really late. I had a lot of high expectations of myself and others to be productive, loads of to-do lists, trying to just do everything and appear unfazed. This was to meet suffering like in the world as my way of doing that, but also social expectations, societal expectations, and finding it hard to say no. And working in the charity sector as I do, there's always more you can do. So I often judge myself and others for not doing enough. I was working in a community centre at that point. In a week, I was managing rental bookings with quite difficult customers, running a community festival, raking leaves on the roof. I don't know why I was doing that. I think some inspection was happening. I was so exhausted, and somebody came up to me and was just like, "How are you doing?" And they could obviously tell I was exhausted. And what I always used to say is like, "I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine." And then I just kind of turned around and I was just thinking, I'm really not fine. If I'm sick, what will happen? Like, how is this community centre going to run? Like, I opened, the centre, I did everything. And I think there was almost like this pride or status of trying to be indispensable, without fault, perfect. I wanted this, like the praise and the fame, but I was also a bit in despair, like, I don't want this, but do I? So I felt responsible for fixing all suffering, including rescuing people close to me. And that kind of led me to feel a bit closed and disconnected from friends, family, and any romantic relationships I was in. It's not all bad to try and be useful in life and productive. I had a desire to change things in response to people's suffering, to make life better for people on the margins of society. And, a lot of what I did was positive, skillful activity. I could see material changes in people's lives. I was involved in a lot of campaigns and protests, and it did lead to some changes for people, and it was like compassionate action. But the way I did it and the reasons I did it were not always sustainable. it led to negative states of mind and poor physical health. I often over-identified with being the person who was helpful and productive, and I engaged in these activities on the basis of craving and delusion. It felt like it was necessary for me to do these for my acceptance into social spheres, being considered like a good worker and a good family member or partner. And underneath, it was an idea that I just wasn't okay just as I was. And so I made myself unwell of anxiety attacks and exhaustion. And then I did what any wise person would do. I quit my job and moved to Sheffield. Thank you. So when I got to my first job, it was a full-time job, and I was just, I was just working away. It was my first week. I really wanted to make a good impression, and it got to 5 p.m. and everyone just suddenly left, and there was literally a chair swiveling next to me while I was typing, and I was amazed. I was like, people leave on time, and it's, they've got a life outside of work, and it's fine. I don't need to stay there. And yet I still couldn't say no to things. I ended up with casework files of clients as high as my computer screen, and just barely scratching the surface of those. So I still had a lot of learning to do. Then I heard about the sutta, about the case of dysentery, and Buddha and Ananda coming across a monk who'd been left by himself because he wasn't of any use to anyone. People didn't think he did anything to help in their community. And just the love and compassion the Buddha had, just washing this person with his own hands, it just really blew me away. That's how I need to be in the world. And just how do I relate to people and others? Is it on the basis of their utility, or is it on the basis of them just being a lovely human being? So, I think, I was often judging or connecting with people on the condition of what they can do for me, and doing that to myself too. So I think going on retreats, practicing the precepts, and also doing a lot of practicing metta bhavana has really changed how I relate to myself and others. I think it's still a training ground. I've been pretty unwell with long COVID, and I've had to keep changing my expectations of what I can do. And I think there's a few things that have helped me to untie my identity or my sense of self with and value from what I do to who I am. And I'm really inspired by the ancient Japanese technique and art form called kintsugi. Some of you might have heard of this, and Prani Hodai has given me a great prop for this. So it's a way of repairing objects that are broken and using gold in any form and turning them into something of beauty. Also, the object renders it actually sometimes stronger, and it's kind of showing all the cracks as really beautiful and something to be cherished, ornamental, as the Sangha quote would say. And I find this just such an amazing idea that I don't need to be perfect. I can be cherished for all of my imperfections, and I can do that for others too. So I'll just put that down here. So having self-metta, rejoicing in myself and others and our uniqueness. And what Dennis was saying, being vulnerable is very, being human is very connecting to people. And then I'm more able to, if I'm able to do that for myself and accept myself, I'm more able to accept and love others. And I really have benefited from much deeper relationships and family ties thanks to this. Another thing that I try and do is another quote from Sangha, doing more and more of less and less. And working part-time for me it's essential for that, because I will always try and overwork, and it's a really good way of me to give myself more time. As part of a Mitra module we studied The Art of Reflection by Ratnaguna, and we a lot of the time at the beginning of our sessions we would do nothing for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and it's still a work in practice, but it's countercultural to do that. Society tells us we need to be productive or we're punished, you just think about how people are treated who are unable to work in society. And the last thing that is really helpful for me is play and ritual. So the complete opposite to being useful, productive. It's also it's unsustainable and not inspiring to do things on that basis. And I want to connect to my higher ideals and inspiration. So doing ritual puja is really important for me, and also just focusing on the process of something, play and like enjoying experiences, and not, like drawing, dancing, swimming or whatever. And it's not about what it looks like, if it's right or wrong, just really being in the moment. And I'd like to finish with a poem which kind of sums up some of my learning over the last 7 years since hearing that initial quote. And it's by Roger Keyes, and it's called Hokusai Says. Hokusai says, look carefully. He says, pay attention, notice. He says, keep looking, stay curious. He says, there is no end to seeing. He says, look forward to getting old. He says, keep changing. You just get more who you really are. He says, get stuck, accept it. Repeat yourself as long as it's interesting. He says, keep doing what you love. He says, keep praying. He says, every one of us is a child. Every one of us is ancient. Every one of us has a body. He says, every one of us is frightened. He says, every one of us has to find a way to live with fear. He says, everything is alive. Shells, buildings, people, fish, mountains, trees. Wood is alive. Water is alive. Everything has its own life. Everything lives inside us. He says, live with the world inside you. He says, it doesn't matter if you draw or write books. It doesn't matter if you saw wood or catch fish. It doesn't matter if you sit at home and stare at the ants on your veranda, or the shadows of the trees and grasses in your garden. It matters that you care. It matters that you feel. It matters that you notice. It matters that life lives through you. Contentment is life living through you. Joy is life living through you. Satisfaction and strength is life living through you. Peace is life living through you. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Look, feel, let life take you by the hand. Let life live through you. Thank you.
Not near enough. Can you hear me? Jolly good. Right, I'm going to give a little talk on the three lakshanas as my radical idea from Buddhism. The three lakshanas, the three characteristics, the three marks of human existence. And in particular, how that has affected my practice, my life. I suppose in particular with regards to the metabhavana, and then in turn how my metabhavana practice informs my understanding of this really profound teaching. And also, I think I'll hope to sort of show that it's really important that we take different views on these teachings and find our way into them. Excuse me. So what are the three lakshanas? Well, we come across them in a really positive light on the beginner's course. Quite early on in the beginner's course, we come across them. And it's important that we come across them in a positive light because they can sound quite negative. Sangha said, it's really important that we balance up our intellectual understanding with good positive emotion. And so we come across them as we can change, we're all interconnected, and that our happiness comes from within, our true happiness comes from within. It's in our own hands, it's not out there, it doesn't rely on stuff or circumstances out there. So that's a really nice positive way of hearing them. The traditional sort of list is everything's impermanent, anicca. Everything is impermanent. Everything is not self. There is no self, anatman. Everything is suffering, dukkha, so not quite so inspiring at first glance. But then I came across it written down in a different way when I was helping Achara, who's not here tonight. I was hoping he'd be here tonight. Achara, an order member of long standing. And I was helping him out about 10 years ago in Chesterfield on a day course. And he wrote them down as everything changes, everything all one word. No thing changes, two separate words, no thing changes. This hurts, you know? And it was just that slightly different way of presenting it that really, I thought, ooh. And something dropped. And then I've spent the last 10 years trying to fathom this, you know, meditating on it and everything else. So yeah, I think when people are talking about the three lakshanas, in particular when they start talking about anatman, not self, what you'll hear people sort of do, and it's not a fault because you need to be positive, is they'll say, well, we've got this doctrine of not self, but of course there is a self, and we all go, phew, you know, great. I did wonder. And then we have to sort of like look at the teaching and think, well, okay, then what does that mean? What does that mean? Now, for me personally, and it is probably just me, it might not work for you, but I lately have come at it from a different angle. I've come at it from the other angle of, okay, then I'm not self. I'm not self. So what is this experience? You know, I come from the angle of the teaching, and then I think, well, what is this experience? And it's helped me really sort of, in my view anyway, get a little bit of depth on it. I'm not going to, like Bodhanaga said, it's not going to be an abstract talk. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's really good that we all sort of go and find our own way into these things. But I will say a few things about what that means for me. When I really get a glimpse of the teaching, when I really get some depth of it, the ground really does shift underneath me, you know, and it's a little bit frightening. But overall, it's really positive and it's really beautiful. Because what it does for me, it tells me that I am not a thing. I'm a relationship. I'm an event. I'm a relationship with everything around me, and everything around me is in relationship with me. I'm absolutely, totally, inextricably connected, not just with other beings, but with everything else. And what that does there and then, right from the off, is give my life meaning. It means that my life means something. My life matters. Because I'm interconnected with everything, whatever I do matters. And that's true of absolutely everybody here. Just coming to the Buddhist Centre matters. Just practicing matters. A little act of kindness matters. Our lives matter. We matter. We mean something. Our lives have meaning because we're so interconnected. It rescues us from this idea of a little self on third rock from the sun in this massive universe. You know, it rescues us from that. It puts us in this position where we are absolutely a part of everything. I'm seeing nodding heads, which is good, and I think we can get it intellectually, but again, you know, going back to what Sangha Night said, it takes a little while to drop emotionally and for us to get it emotionally. And I personally need like retreat conditions, you know, in order to sort of get that kind of depth. And I was on retreat recently, quite recently, and it was a retreat being led by Satyaraja, who's a senior order member at Padmaloka. It was a meditation retreat, and so he was just introducing the meditation, the early morning meditation. So I'm sitting there, you know, half asleep, dribbling, and anyway, he said, of course, there are two types of impermanence. I thought, what? You know, I'm just getting used to one type of impermanence. What are you talking about? But what he was talking about, he started talking about the wheel, which I'm glad Dennis mentioned that earlier on. He said there's the kind that we experience impermanence when we're on the wheel in a way that we don't like. You know, we're running from one thing to another. We're clinging to things. We're pushing other things away. And it just reinforces our habits, and you know, it keeps us on the wheel. And then there's the other type of impermanence that we experience if we step off the wheel onto the spiral. Some of these teachings might be a bit new to some of you, but you might remember from the beginner's course, the gap. You know, we find the gap and we can start changing. If we've got faith in the Dharma, you know, we can step off the wheel. Joy arises. Now, each successive stage augments, you know, it builds, and we end up going higher. But it's impermanent. It is impermanent. Each stage is impermanent, but we're not clinging. In fact, if we cling, it won't work. Yeah. And this got me thinking, all right, okay. And I realized I'd got a lot of letting go to do. I was still identifying with past events and things like this. Good job I realised, because it was actually my ordination retreat. Quite a lot of letting go to do. And I came up with like a climbing metaphor. I was quite happy with it, actually. It's a pretty blunt metaphor. You should get it. And it sounds a bit Zen-like. In order to get up, you've got to let go. And so let me explain. So you've got this handhold. You're on this big cliff, and you've got this big handhold. Your feet are well placed, and you're looking up. And it looks pretty scary, it looks pretty blank and scary, but you know that that's the way up. But you want to stay. You've got this safe handhold. It's really difficult to move, but you actually know that you've got to let go. You've got to let go of that in order to reach higher. So, not too difficult a metaphor, is it? That we've got to let go with our minds. We've got to let go with our minds of our views and opinions of self and other, in order to reach higher, to reach higher truth. We've got to let go of that. The Metta-Bhavana practice really helps us in this respect. It really helps us break down the barriers between self and other. So very briefly, you can't have metta for an object. You only have metta for other beings. You don't have metta for a car or a job. Love, what passes for love anyway, sometimes objectifies, doesn't it? We can love our car, we can love our job, we can love our partner, providing they remain the same. We objectify them. That's not true of everybody, of course, but that can happen. And the same happens when we hate someone. We're objectifying them, and we're not seeing them for what they really are. On the one hand, we've got this thing that we objectify and that we love, and we want to stay the same. And when it changes, we really don't want it to. And then on the other hand, we've got this person that we hate, and we don't even consider that they can change. It's just that it is just their behaviour. And we even say things like, well, it's not the person, it's the behaviour I don't like, it's the actions that I don't like. And well, that person is just action and behaviour. There isn't anything fixed and independent about them. And we just have to sort of realise that. So let's just sit loosely, let's do the Metta-Bhavana, let that loosen our idea, our views and opinions of what we are, our views and opinions of what is permanent and what isn't permanent. And then we can have a really good crack at that last Lakshana, suffering, and we can start to bring a bit of joy into the world and end suffering. Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all three of those talks. Thank you very much to Dennis and to Izzy and to Dhyasingha. Real privilege just to hear people's own particular take on Dharma ideas and how it's moved them, how it's affected them, and just to hear about their lives as well. So a real privilege to hear from Dennis and Izzy and Dhyasingha. So let's show our appreciation with a big round of applause. So now we'll go into our groups in the usual way, and just a chance to, was one of those ideas that resonated with you, something that sparked you off from what you've heard this evening? Maybe is there a shocking idea that we've not talked about in the series yet that you found very radical, that's affected you? That could be something to talk about. So go into our groups in the usual way. There'll be the Wednesday night group will be in the green room with Pranya Hridaya. There'll be a men's group in the Red Shrine Room, a women's group in the bookshop. There'll be mixed groups upstairs here in the Great Hall. And then after the tea break, we'll get a chance to work in the Metta-Bhavana. Dhyasingha was talking about the Metta-Bhavana meditation. So after the tea break, Mahaprasad is going to lead us in a Metta-Bhavana together.